David felt like a child as he carefully placed folders filled with documents into his luxurious leather briefcase. He was in a perfect mood because today was one of those days when you wake up feeling refreshed. After a light breakfast of an omelette and orange juice, he put on his best shoes for the day's occasion. It was a pivotal day for his business career. After years of running his construction business alone, he had finally found the perfect partner. He was thrilled and grateful that fate had brought Thomas into his life as a business partner. Thomas was an ideal collaborator, with extensive experience in various business fields and a vast network of connections among business people and other influential individuals. He was the perfect person for David to bring on board. Thomas was also highly skilled in handling business matters, and their partnership in construction had significantly boosted their annual income. David had built his business from the ground up, enduring many hardships. In recent years, he began delegating more responsibilities and had reached a point where he could afford more time for himself. As he enjoyed more free time, he started contemplating the idea of starting a family. At over 35, he didn't want to become an older father. He wanted to witness his children grow up and embark on their journeys. David also wished to experience the joy of having grandchildren and seeing them navigate life. As a businessman, he had many plans. Unlike many of his close friends who didn't want to miss out on the fun of their youth, he didn't want to regret not having kids when he was old and gray. On the other hand, David didn't have any specific person in mind as a potential partner. He hadn't been in a relationship for a long time. In the past, he had encountered several possible candidates and even tested their feelings for him. However, the women always failed these tests spectacularly, revealing that they were only interested in his money. David longed for a modest and respectable woman interested in building a home and kindling a loving relationship with him. Yet, finding such a woman with genuine passion was challenging, especially in high society. Ladies in high society were often cunning and more concerned with keeping up with their friends and maintaining their lavish lifestyles, such as ensuring their hairdressers were not cheaper than their neighbors. It was hard to discern who had genuine feelings. Despite his recent success, David didn't even hire a housekeeper, preferring to run the household independently. He came from a humble background where hard work was not shunned but rather enjoyed. As he pondered his daily life, he gathered all his paperwork and finally left his apartment. Upon exiting the building, he glanced at the windows of his luxurious 4-bedroom apartment on the top floor. It was a pleasing sight, and a sleek car was parked in the lot. Walking towards the car, he suddenly felt a light touch on his arm. He turned around to see a poorly dressed girl around 8 years old, her appearance indicating she was a typical beggar. David expected her to ask for money, but instead, she said something that made him sit down on a brioche and think deeply. One thing was sure after this encounter: he was not going to the meeting with Thomas. Years before these events, David was in a similarly good mood. He was much younger then, and his life vastly differed from his present situation. However, this did not dampen his spirits. Even though he was not wealthy, he lived with his mother in a cramped apartment and worked as an ordinary programmer in a small computer company. But at the same time, he had a much greater and more valuable happiness. His beloved girlfriend, Sarah, to whom he had already proposed, was waiting for them to set a wedding date. David and Sarah often enjoyed walks along the riverbank in one of the parks of their small, mountain-nestled town. The town was charming but not frequently visited by tourists, and job opportunities were limited. Even with a degree from Pedagogical University, Sarah struggled to find work there. She had been living with her grandmother for a long time, relying on her pension. Sarah was reluctant to depend on her grandmother's limited income and wanted to start a new life with her boyfriend in better conditions. So, she agreed to move to the big city after their wedding. However, she was unaware of the obstacle that would come with this decision: her grandmother, Helen. At 80, Helen deeply cared for her granddaughter and wanted the best for her. However, she harbored doubts about Sarah's future with David. Helen didn't trust David to be her granddaughter's dependable and protective partner due to his past issues with the law and his erratic behavior during his youth. Despite David turning his life around and becoming successful, he couldn't escape his past mistakes. He realized that people judged him based on his past, and he couldn't change that perception, even though he had become a responsible, hard-working person. Helen believed that once a lawbreaker, always a lawbreaker, and she repeatedly shared this opinion with her granddaughter. "Sarah, you're going to regret being with this guy. Dump him before it's too late," she would say. "There are so many good, hard-working men out there who would treat you right, but instead, you're sticking with David like he's coated in honey," Helen often said. "Oh, Grandma, please stop talking like that. David loves me, and I love him. He's changed, and what happened in his past is behind him," Sarah would respond affectionately. Despite their differing perspectives, they managed to avoid any significant conflicts. Sarah would likely have still left with her boyfriend if it weren't for their fateful last walk together. On that beautiful summer evening, everything seemed perfect. The sky was clear, and the air was filled with the pleasant scent of subtropical foliage. David took Sarah's hand and led her down the shady path by the waterfront, sharing his plans for their move. "We're going to rent an apartment first. My savings are enough for now, but we'll start looking for jobs as soon as we settle in. I already have some income from my remote job, so I don't think we'll have any financial issues. I hope you won't have to work in the end because a man must provide for his family," David said with a sly look at his beloved. "I trust you in this, and I hope everything will work out for us. I'm just worried about my grandma being alone here," Sarah replied, holding his hand tightly in her tiny palm. "What's the problem? We'll get settled and bring her with us. Despite her age, she's well educated and has a good sense of humor." "Mrs. Fields is in great shape," David reassured her. Sarah didn't tell her fiancé about her grandmother's opinion of him to avoid hurting his feelings. Of course, she knew it would be too painful for him to hear. Her grandma would never move in with someone she hated. The young couple conversed pleasantly as they walked along the waterfront when disaster suddenly struck. A roar echoed from the mountains above them, and the ground shook. Although they lived in a seismically active zone and small earthquakes were common, nature seemed to have unleashed its full force this time. A powerful mudflow descended on the town, sweeping away everything in its path and quickly approaching the location where the couple stood. Unfortunately, Sarah and David were directly in its path, and it was too late for them to escape. A wide aperture blocked the road behind them and a raging river ahead of them. Before they could even blink, they were swept away by the mudflow directly into the river. As the hands of the lovers parted, they managed to scream out their love for each other before the raging current consumed them both. A week later, David, hobbling with a cane, made his way to his beloved's house. In the flash flood, David sustained an injury to his leg after hitting the rocky bottom of the river, but he managed to make it to the shore, where he was rescued and taken to the hospital. Despite his injury, David was determined to see his life partner. As soon as he was able, he rushed to Sarah's home. However, when he arrived, Sarah's grandma answered the door. She was dressed in all black. Unknown to David, she had seen him coming from the window and had dressed accordingly. "How is Sarah? Where is she?" he asked frantically. "I warned her many times to stay away from you, but now she's gone. It's all your fault. You took her to that cursed park, and now her death is on your conscience," she replied, her voice filled with bitterness. The older woman screamed at him. David's world spun as he heard her words, and he felt guilty for the death of his beloved. Overwhelmed with shock, he made his way to the park, where they had planned to go after their hike in the mountains. As he reached the stairwell, he collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down his face as he sobbed uncontrollably. The older woman continued to berate him before slamming the door shut, declaring that he was not even worthy to visit Sarah's grave. Unable to bear the pain, David left the town that day, consumed by grief and guilt. However, David did not know that the story he had been told was invalid. Sarah had survived the flood and was in a hospital not far from where David was. She, too, had been told that David had died, swept away by the mudflow. Mrs. Fields, Sarah's grandmother, had lied to them both to separate the couple and keep Sarah close to her. After being discharged from the hospital, Sarah was heartbroken and struggled to move on. However, she found the strength to keep going because she now had something to live for. She was carrying David's child. She decided not to tell her grandmother about it yet, as she had a weak heart. Unfortunately, Sarah never got the chance to say to her, as it seemed God punished the deceitful grandmother for her cruel actions. Mrs. Fields died of a heart attack just a month after her lies had been revealed. It was clear that Sarah couldn't continue living in a town where she had lost two of her closest loved ones so quickly. As a result, like her fiancé, she decided to sell her apartment and seek happiness in foreign lands. Her goal was to eventually purchase a small, older home in the suburbs where she could build a new life with her child. She could take the train to work once her daughter was old enough for kindergarten. However, she lived in the hostel while working. But all her troubles were yet to come. It had been 3 years since Sarah gave birth to her daughter, Chloe. She had been living in the hostel, working at a cannery for only a few months. Fortunately, the manager allowed her to live in a room, subsisting on benefits, savings, and small part-time jobs as a seamstress. Then, the accurate hard times began for her. It all started when she met a kind and happy woman at the church where she prayed for the repose of her fiancé and grandmother's souls. After talking with her and learning that Sarah was alone and dreamed of owning her own house, the woman offered to help her acquire real estate. Unfortunately, Sarah trusted her, but it turned out that the woman was a scammer who had deceived her. Sarah's new house was registered under the woman's name. Her appeals to law enforcement agencies didn't yield any results, as they did not see the woman's actions as a crime since Sarah did not have a receipt proving she transferred the money. As a result, the mother and daughter were left without savings and soon found themselves without housing because the room they were living in was needed by the nephew of one of the factory bosses. Sarah was in despair, finding herself homeless with a child in her arms. She had nowhere to turn except to return to the church for help from the Lord. Even though she had met the person who left her without a penny there, she did not lose her faith in God. This time, he heard her prayers and sent a kind older man to her. Brian lived in the city in his comfortable apartment, but in the countryside, he had an old shack that was too worn and unappealing for his children. The older man offered the mother and child a place to live in it. Although the train ran there, it would take Sarah 2 hours to get to work, but it was the only option available to her. So, they began to live with Chloe in that remote village. Over time, Sarah continued to work at the cannery but is now in an accountant position. However, her salary was insufficient to rent an apartment on the city's outskirts, especially since Chloe had developed health issues that required a significant portion of her salary. Sarah did her best to help her daughter and worked part-time as an assembly line worker, but it was still insufficient. An expensive foreign drug that could help her daughter was beyond her reach. Chloe was a bright and beautiful dark-skinned child, but she had to wear glasses due to her illness. Seeing how hard her mother worked, she decided to help out. Every day after school, instead of waiting for her mother at the park nearby, she took her pipe with her and went to play at the square. She was hoping to collect some money. Passers-by took pity on the little beggar and often put coins and small bills in her hat. Although it didn't significantly help her mother, Chloe still believed things would improve. One day, as usual, Chloe was walking towards the square when she passed by an expensive car. She overheard a muffled conversation between two men, one of whom was emerging from under the vehicle. Chloe followed them, but the men ignored the little beggar. "Great job, Ryan. Our guy will blow up as soon as he arrives for the meeting with the client." If only he knew who Thomas was. All that time in prison finally paid off. "All right. Stop talking. He pays well, and the rest is none of our concern," the accomplice replied, glancing back at Chloe. But seeing that she seemed a little beggar, he immediately lost interest. The men continued while Chloe quickly ran to the car to wait for the owner. David was amazed when the little beggar told him not to go to the meeting because some guys had put something in his car that would explode so severely that everyone in the neighborhood would remember. The businessman believed her and, just to be safe, called the police. The police removed the explosive device from under the car. But the most important thing was that while they were waiting for the police, David managed to ask the beggar about her background. The girl told him her story and showed him a photo of her mother, which made his heart race. Sarah was even more surprised than David when an unknown man called her and thanked her for saving his life. He said that after all the issues were settled with the police, he would personally take Chloe home. Thomas, along with his accomplices, was arrested. Thomas was arrested the same day. David never would have thought that his trusted and respectable associate would do something like this for money. The following day, terribly worried about her daughter, Sarah was amazed when a fleet of wedding cars drove up to her house. Her daughter triumphantly got out of the first car, accompanied by David, alive and unharmed. The lovers rushed to embrace each other while Chloe stood nearby, not knowing who this man was. "Will you marry me?" was the only thing David could whisper. "Yes," was her reply. It was impossible to count how much the poor woman and her daughter had to endure, but happiness had returned to her. Even the scammer lady, after being approached by severe people, had to return the embezzled money. Sarah did not hold a grudge against her grandma, knowing full well that she wanted her happiness. When they told the whole family about this at the old woman's grave, the clear sky was suddenly covered by a small cloud, from which a few drops of rain fell. It was as if the grandmother was asking for forgiveness for her actions. Thank you for listening to this story. What do you think of the story and the characters? How would you handle things differently? If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing by clicking the bell notification button. It will help us out, and you won't miss new stories. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. The story of David, Sarah, and Chloe is a poignant tale of love, hardship, betrayal, and redemption. It captures the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to overcome even the most challenging obstacles. Here are some personal reflections on the story. 1. Resilience and hope *. Sarah's journey from losing her home and facing betrayal to finding hope and starting anew is incredibly inspiring. Her unwavering determination to provide for her daughter despite numerous adversities showcases the strength of a mother's love and the human spirit's resilience. 2. Trust and betrayal *. The betrayal by David's trusted associate, Thomas, highlights the painful reality that sometimes, those we trust the most can betray us for their gain. It serves as a reminder to be cautious and discerning in our personal and professional relationships. 3. Faith and forgiveness *. Sarah's unwavering faith in God, even after being deceived by a woman she met at church, is a testament to the power of faith in providing hope and guidance during difficult times. Despite the latter's actions, her ability to forgive her grandmother speaks volumes about the importance of understanding and forgiveness in healing and moving forward. 4. Community and support *. The kindness of the older man, Brian, who offered Sarah and Chloe a place to stay, underscores the importance of community and the impact that even small acts of kindness can have on someone's life. It reminds us that we should strive to support and uplift those around us whenever possible. 5. Love and reunion *. Chloe's brave actions facilitate David and Sarah's emotional reunion, a heartwarming conclusion to their tumultuous journey. It reinforces the idea that true love can endure and triumph over life's challenges. 6. Justice and redemption *. Thomas's eventual arrest and the return of the embezzled money provide a sense of justice and closure. They highlight that while justice may be delayed, it can still prevail. Overall, this story emphasizes the importance of resilience, hope, faith, forgiveness, community support, and the enduring power of love. It is a touching reminder that despite our trials, there is always the possibility of redemption and happiness. If I were in Sarah's position, I would seek legal advice earlier when dealing with the scammer and build a more robust support network to avoid feeling so isolated. It's also important to remain cautious and trust but verify, especially when making significant life decisions involving others.